Hey everyone, welcome to today's show on Wealth Strategy Secrets. Today we are joined by Dr. Sam Pappas, who is an internal medicine physician specializing in the fields of personal medicine and integrative health and wellness. He has over 25 years of experience and has practiced in a variety of diverse positions in both academic health centers and private practice. Dr. Pappas has received many recognitions and has been called the Dr. Oz of Arlington. He is passionate about helping change the paradigm of disease-based medicine to one that emphasizes systems medicine, root causes, biochemical individuality, is patient-centered, and uses primarily lifestyle medicine to achieve optimal health and function. His outlook and philosophy have been shaped by his Greek heritage and his study of the ancient Greek ethos of health and vitality in combination with his personal experience with traditional cultures and the modern Mediterranean diet and lifestyle. Dr. Pappas regularly writes and collaborates with his twin brother, Tom, who is a business leader and retired Army officer in the area of optimizing leadership health through the use of ancient and modern timeless ideas, practices, and strategies. Dr. Pappas runs his own unique practice, Pappas Health, in Tysons Corner, Virginia, that incorporates innovative services encompassing both a high-tech and high-touch approach, while maintaining the best of holistic and traditional medicine in a collaborative environment. Dr. Pappas, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, my friend. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I can't tell you how excited I am to have you on the show and really share the wisdom, that you've provided for me over the years with our audience, and really share one of my top team members with our audience. This is a really special opportunity and grateful that you're here.
Well, I'm excited. I can't thank you enough. Congrats on the podcast. I'm just so excited, so impressed with it. Your passion and ethos just comes across, and I'm excited to talk about how we do things so similarly and have a similar outlook.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, isn't it? Because in my journey, right, I really talk about this concept of holistic wealth and what that really means, because I think for a lot of people, wealth means, different things to them, right? And we often think of just, in a financial perspective, are you going to be able to make it to retirement? Do you have enough financial security and things like that? But, throughout my journey, I realized how critical it is to really have health as part of your underlying, fabric, right? That's going to be able to take you to new levels. It's going to be able to, energize you and really live, not only a long lifespan, but a strong health span as well.
Absolutely. I was impressed when we met. We hit it off. We had a lot of things in common, a lot of passions. And when you tell me your philosophy, it really just dovetailed so well into mine. The importance of, as you had said, your IQ, having your mindset and your health set and your financial mindset all lined up. And I think that's what's missing in, unfortunately, traditional medicine, where, the recommendation is to take a pill to match the ill. We're going to name it and then just tame it and blame it, rather than taking a deeper dive, with some more foundational principles that you and I share.
Absolutely. So why don't we get things started, Dr. Pappas? If you can talk to us a little bit about, your background and journey, and really how, you got to your unique philosophy of medicine, right? Which I think is very contrary to, what 90% of the rest of the world is practicing and preaching.
No, I appreciate that. So, I'm a Greek New Jersey boy. Sometimes when I get excited, my New Jersey accent, gets the best of me here. And I was brought up with one foot in the traditional Greek world and one foot in the American world. And it was like two great cultures intermingling. So love sports, loved academics, almost followed my twin brother down his path of being a West Pointer and a military guy. Decided I wanted to go to college and med school, and wound up to be very fortunate to be a chief resident, to be an academic internist, and thought that academic medicine and knowing all this knowledge was the ideal pinnacle of a healer. And then I started practicing in New Jersey. I stole my wife to be and brought her back to New Jersey, and realized that, the skills I had in the tool sets were not very helpful in helping patients, other than just giving them a pill to match the ill. And I came across some colleagues who were interested in health and wellness, martial arts. They said, listen, there's a lot of data supporting the ideas that you and I grew up on. And then I started using that research and combining it with my interest in looking at the ancient Greeks and saying, the first hackers were the ancient Greek Olympians. And we could talk more about that, but they're doing things that you and I do now, and they were citizen scientists. So I started looking at that and saying, that ethos, I like to call it a dynamic traditionalism, taking the best of, modern technology in the future with the past culture, is probably a much better approach. And so I started practicing this, and, whether I was in New Jersey or down here in Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C. area, patients have gravitated towards it. And, they really get this. And I learned so much from them. And I've also experimented on myself as a citizen scientist. So it's been a great journey. I work with great people, but I learned the most from patients like you, just trying to figure out how best to personalize health.
Yeah, it's really fascinating too. And can you talk a little bit about really this approach of integrative medicine, right? Because I think that's definitely unique, and how is that, foundational to your approach?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a large tent that has a lot of different names. I'll call it integrative because I think it's a nice term. A lot of folks say functional medicine. I really like the term personalized medicine as well, because you want to make it for the unique person. My take is there should be principles over protocols. A lot of people in the health sphere will just say, let's just do my protocol. Probably not unlike what happens in the financial world. So, the principles that I find, and I try to explain to people, include, personalization. More important to know the person who has the illness than the illness the person has. Looking at biochemical individuality. And I really look forward to talking about the importance of knowing where your biochemistry is taking you in blood work. Also important is to say, listen, this is a system. It's not a silo. So everything connects together. So when you're fit and your heart is great, your gut is great, they're all interconnected. Also looking at how best can we personalize it as a citizen scientist. And then I like to take, my Greek interest and say, are there deeper principles, such as Plato saying the whole is more important than the part?
Hmm. Yeah, that's excellent. That resonates so well, right? Because, and it's kind of, as we talk about this holistic wealth strategy all the time, it's having all of the pieces of the puzzle really to define wealth as you want to define it, right? And really living life intentionally. And I think that's really well said in terms of having all the different pieces of the puzzle. And what struck me, so much, my first meeting with Dr. Pappas was so insightful, right? We sat down, and rather than him just pulling up, historical charts, right, and talking about my, hereditary disposition and things like that, he talked to me as a person, right? He really talked to me about, how are things going in my life? How are things going at work? How are things going on the home front, right? Because all of these things really take effect, right, into your your health, your wellness of your mindset, right? All of these things. And I thought it was just such a great approach. And as a consequence, we've gotten to know each other very well, and he's been able to, basically, I feel every time we have a meeting, it's like, yes, we're looking at blood panels and different markers, and we're trying to make adjustments and dial those in. But it's also very well balanced with, your life and where you are currently in life. You're having any, big stresses, and then, how can we make adjustments, right, to fine tune some of those things so that you can really live right in a state of, what I would call peak performance.
Yeah, that's so well put. I think about, what's a good life? And to me, and I know to you, it means health, character and ethics and intellect. And not many of us successful men and women, achieve those and have that balance. What I was impressed when we met, Dave, was that you had a lot of good balance. No one is perfect all the time. And many of my successful men and women, when I meet them, I tell them, listen, you spent all your health trying to acquire wealth. Now your system is broken and you have to use your wealth to acquire health. And it wouldn't have been better, or maybe now, wouldn't it be good now to say, listen, I need to have some balance. I need to be the CEO of my own health and not function like a 1950s athlete where it was just told just to do more work and no recovery. So to me, looking at these modern principles that the athletic world strives to talk about are so critical. And I sensed it with you, you were more advanced, right? So definitely not all my stubborn guys are as talented as you, but even someone like you who looks great, great body composition, had some areas that weren't optimal, and you were striving to make progress, and you had a great mindset. And we discussed, goals. And I knew right away that you were eager to be the best version of yourself, to handle, as Jim Rohn said, the winters. After every fall comes a winter, but thankfully after every winter comes, the spring. You had, as Jim Rohn said, the set of your sail was already pretty good. I think a lot of my patients, especially those of us in our middle ages, don't have a really good set of their sail, and they have just a couple areas that are good.
Yeah, well said. And, I would add to that. I mean, it was just really powerful for me. And, I would really encourage others really to really grasp what we're talking about here, right? Because this is really taking action on your health and being proactive with your health. Because as you described earlier, typically the way Western medicine is done, in fact, even all the insurance companies, right? All the insurance companies are just built on some diagnosis, right? You have some type of problem. But when you approach health in this manner, which is a proactive manner, you're finding out some things that you might not necessarily know. And, I'll give you kind of a shocking example, for myself. I think it was probably 5 years ago or something, when I went in to see Dr. Pappas, and he recommended that, hey, we have this new technique, which I believe it's the is it a sonogram?
Yeah.
Type technique, right? So they can actually check your arteries and check, how are they doing, right? And we came back, and you would think, I mean, I've been working out my whole life. I eat well. I'm on top of things. And we had one artery that was blocked like over 50%. And so what if I never knew that? Right. I mean, and I believe you told me at that time that, hey, that was, potentially a ticking time bomb, right? At some point, you're going to have an issue with that. But
Right.
since then, I'm happy to report that we have adjusted the dials, and I'm taking, by the way, my supplement, how much I spend in supplements, I think has surpassed my grocery bill. However,
Exactly.
our last read, I think we said that I now show arteries of, someone who's 5 or 6 years younger.
Oh, your delta and your change. I mean, I empathize. I'm not only the president, I'm a member of the club. I've had similar challenges.
Yeah.
So I understand, right? Is it what we're eating or what's eating us? You took it as, listen, okay, there's wear and tear here. This isn't my destiny. I'm going to make some tweaks, push some different levers. You intuitively knew that health is really an investment rather than an expense. And I'm going to be using all the tools I have at my disposal, whether it's exercise or exorcism, right? Whether it's a medicine, a vitamin, a supplement, another lever, another hack, so to speak. So yeah, you're a great example of just turning things around and on a much better trajectory, because you were eager and open to look at and use technology. Can we use this sonogram of the neck called a CIMT that measures how thick the artery is, if there's any plaque? Can we look at laboratory data and see, where the river of life is taking us? Can we try to fill in the gaps? Can we do a self-assessment? I'm always impressed that, Dave, you're somebody who, you come into our office, into our visits, like in a confessional, right? And say, here's things that are working for me. Here are things that aren't. What other tools, what other techniques do I need? And what you do is you come in more than once, right? I have a lot of guys that come once a year. I give them 10 assignments and they did one. They're like, oh yeah, I took my fish oil. I said, but what about your sleep? Your workouts, your goals, and they fall short on there. You're constantly rechecking multiple times a year. So, you lead by example for your team.
Yeah, it is part of my goals practice. And every time we have a meeting, I like to come into my meetings prepared and understand, hey, what were not only the goals, but what new habits can I create? Right, that kind of support that. So I have some good ones of progress this year. I've been working on my gut health, been taking AG1, and there's some other hacks maybe we can jump into in a little bit, but maybe
Sure.
since we're kind of on this topic, this might be a nice segue into a recent article you and your brother Tom wrote, which I really, boy, it just resonated so much with me, and I think it will with our audience as well, who are a lot of hard charging entrepreneurs and go-getters. But you talked about the concept of a corporate athlete. So maybe you can kind of share with us, your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. Tom, like you, is a former military man, in that business world, and he lives in Europe. And both he and I were realizing that we were, in our effort to mentor colleagues and friends and family, we realized that the sports foundation was very helpful. And we came across this term called corporate athlete, and that there was research being done by sports psychologists who said that, the modern corporate world, which I would say incorporates also stay-at-home moms and solopreneurs and those who have their own business versus a large organization, that these people in this corporate world were treating themselves like athletes in the 50s rather than modern athletes. The athletes evolved to having training time, not just being on, to recovery, to having a coach, to looking at oscillation. You're on and then you're off, using different modalities with a foundation of physical health. And then we found out that most people in the corporate world, they just work on time management, just cognitive health. They don't look at fitness or energy. They were reading, the Stephen Covey books on time management, but weren't looking at the foundation of energy. So it resonated with us. We started sharing it with our tribes. They then started brainstorming and saying, you know what, this is a good foundation for the leader's workout. What's a good workout for a leader? And we've taken some of those principles and kind of melded with our interest in the Greek warriors, the Greek gymnasium, men and women of ancient times, looking at, mindset, philosophy, and workouts. And there's definitely some overlap, so for example, a physical foundation, right? And if you have a good physical foundation, then you can turn on your emotional flexibility, your cognitive flexibility, and then your spiritual flexibility or your purpose. So a lot of similarities, and then some differences, saying, the ancient Greek athletes talked about, the term agony, right? The term of an athlete or a workout in Greek is the term for agony, or the pain, the discipline. You're looking at their philosophy, combining it with fitness and nutrition. The word diet comes from the Greek word dieta, which means like a lifestyle. So we kind of use both of those principles, and we try to put together some of those resources for people. I think the corporate athlete literature is a great start, and something that you've been doing. So, we'll give a link to all your listeners. I think it's just a great resource to say, hey, am I meeting these goals as a corporate athlete? What are some things I can do, for myself and for my culture as well in the workforce?
Yeah, it was really fascinating read. And in fact, I mean, all of the literature that you're creating is just really well put together, really well thought out. So I applaud you and Tom for putting that out and making that available for folks. It's been really fascinating, and I can share, with you and the audience. I mean, one of the biggest challenges for me actually during the pandemic was actually this, it was really health related, because I had been really in a role where, I was out meeting clients kind of all of the time, right? And, always meeting clients, traveling and doing things like this. So I really liked, I like movement, and I always knew that about myself. And that's probably why I'm into sports and everything. But I literally had to change the way I worked when we got into this lockdown period. And, the sitting was creating a lot of problems. In fact, I did have to get my knee scoped and had some issues with that. And I believe it was directly proportional, to COVID and everything. But it's fascinating because kind of like you were talking about the modern day, corporate athlete, right? Versus in the old days. Well, I see myself as an athlete, and I think a lot more people should see themselves as an athlete and how they approach work, right? Because an athlete actually has three different phases. They're either resting, they're preparing to compete, or they're competing, right? But
Yeah.
often in the time and effort economy, people just go to work and then they just work and they fill the time, right? But if you can actually structure yourself to be in more of this performance-based economy, right, where when you're on and you're in your focus time, which would be the same as competing, you are on, and you are constantly
Yes.
focused on mastery. And when you're off, you can give yourself the permission to actually completely unplug. So it's a radically different way to work. And most of us, heck, I came out of the Marine Corps, so it was always, who's the first one into the office, who's the last one, who did
Right.
PT harder, and it's not necessarily working smarter, but in this day and age, you have to be able to work smarter, not harder.
Yeah, that's a great point. You touched upon some key terms. One of my interests with looking at the ancient athletes was they were competing. So competition is important. And then they were struggling, this term agon, as I mentioned, or agony, struggle. So competition and struggle, having disciplines, a spiritual discipline. So I think you're spot on. I would say is, I'm one of the few doctors in this country who've been treating COVID from the beginning. We're very blessed to have treated over 1,000 patients and no one's been hospitalized. And I'm going to get some links to your listeners for like our COVID action plan to look at what are things you can continue to do. But you focused on the terrain, not just the microbe, right? Most patients were making the mistake. They're like, oh, I'm going to focus on locking down and just putting a mask on or laying low, rather than saying, listen, I can improve my terrain. Hygiene, the Greek goddess, is the concept of your health, diet, but your terrain, and say, I'm going to build my terrain up. I'm going to have a continued good fitness. I'm going to sleep well. I'm going to take care of myself with respect. I'm going to recover. That's why you did very well. A lot of people didn't do well, unfortunately. Thankfully, there are many things to do for prevention and many off-label medicines that help. But a lot of folks were getting recurrences, having problems. They think if I just got a vaccine, I was fine, rather than saying, listen, I could be a wounded warrior. And I love that metaphor that my brother and I use a lot. We can learn a lot from a wounded warrior. And I think you handled it well, even though it was a shock to the system. And I tell patients, as part of that write-up, first know thyself, right? As Socrates says, where are you? And then create a battle plan. What I like about your approach in general, Dave, is that, you're always strategically thinking about the different aspects of your life. What is the action plan? What is an after action plan review? What are my goals? So I think a lot of men and women don't think strategically. And that's why I really think the military thinking is important. Even those of us who are not in the military can learn a lot. I'll often study, your tribes to learn about, that aspect, not just military history, but how do you focus on logistics and strategy to create a health plan for you and your family?
What if everything you thought you knew about investing was wrong? Would you like to create a wealth strategy like the top 1% have and get exclusive access to top private equity deals that provide downside protection, tax efficiency, predictable cash flow, and have a lucrative upside? Discover how with the Pantheon Advantage and join our investor club today at pantheoninvest.com.
Yeah, I love that. And so the word health plan, I know a lot of people have different approaches out there. Dr. Attia talks about it as training for your centenarian Olympics. And I love his quote where he says, look, if you want to be doing the things you want to do, like pick up your grandkids, in your last decade, I mean, you've got to be kicking ass in your 50s, So
Right.
do you have an overarching kind of framework or approach that, you advise with your clients?
Well, I do, and I didn't uh, necessarily develop it, but I kind of tweak it. And again, I think looking back at the ancient Greeks, one of the things I was impressed with was, the ancient Greek miracle of wellness incorporated strict dieting and fasting, intense exercise, regular meditational walks, lessons on character and ethics, and then contemplating the cosmos, often with a walk. It's easier to do that in Greece, right, than it is in Virginia, much better in Florida or Texas, right? But very fascinating, holistic approach, saying we're going to do the fitness, we're going to eat well, of course, we're going to focus on a character and ethical training, the ancient Greek gymnasium of the philosophy. We're going to contemplate the cosmos as well. So it's kind of my foundation and my prism when I look at health. And I love Peter Attia's work. I think he's great. And, it makes sense. And again, these are things that patients get surprised about when I tell them, listen, the fitness lever may be more important for your longevity than, the diet lever. But if you don't have good character and ethics, what's your mindset going to be like? Are you contemplating? A lot of patients in the wellness world, and I believe in the reasonable critique from within, right? In each category that I'm in, whether I'm in the wellness world or the academic medical world, a lot of the wellness world says, we're just going to do some deep breathing and we're going to be fine. And my take is, listen, you still have to slay that dragon. I personally will, meditate with an exercise or a walk or kind of low steady state cardio. It gets me time to think. But then we still have to strategize to conquer, that dragon, to talk about what you're going to do for your passion, for your work, for your family, for the goals that you set so well, Dave. So, I think a lot of modern health is just not unlike wealth and saying, I'm going to have it just to have it, right? And you've always said to me, look, wealth's important, but what are you going to do with it? Are you going to show it off, like your six pack and your bank account? Or are you going to use it for purposeful good? And what I've always been impressed with you, because you take care of a lot of successful men who don't have a good quality of character and ethics, is that you have that character, that ethical approach. And you always look at wealth and, financial success as a tool to help us achieve other worthy goals.
Yeah, appreciate that. What I'd like to do now is I really want to make this actionable for people. And, one of the things, as I kind of talked about that example, right, where I found my artery was blocked, right? And luckily, I took this proactive approach to trying to treat that. But it's really sad that, we listen to great podcasts or TED Talks, or we read a book. And how often are we always moved by some really compelling story because someone had a loss of a loved one, they had a chronic illness or something of that nature, which then put them on a trajectory to actually change the course of their life, right? So I would love to try to encourage people to just really do some deep thinking here, about your health, your vision, what it is that you want in life, think in the future. And so what are some things, if there were just some key takeaways that you could recommend to people, what could they start working on today?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I try to do that in some of the links that I have for your listeners. So for example, a discussion about the importance of laboratory studies. And I talk about which of the markers are important, which ones to ask for, how to go about asking for it. You can now even do it yourself and get labs ordered through a third party. So there's some links there. But what are some of the key metrics? More than just the typical stuff. There's markers now to look at inflammation in the arteries and hormones and nutrient deficiency. So I kind of essential fats. We've known for the longest time, the more the omega-3 or healthy fats are, the better our brain is. Why are they giving and recommending for special forces to have high levels of omega-3 and fish oil and krill oil, right? Very good for resiliency. So I have some information for that to collect some data. Also some information on that artery scan that you and I do regularly. I have a discussion about that and also link to the #1 company that does this, where you can actually contact them and say, hey, who has this test in the city or state I live in? And I want to get it done. So I want to encourage patients to, be proactive and check out their arteries and see how young or old their arteries are. And I have information about, the role of supplements, how I think about them, how to go about it, which are some good areas to look at. And then some links where they can get some more information on that. I have a link to a questionnaire that I do regularly on all my clients called an MSQ, multiple symptom questionnaire, that kind of goes over a variety of symptoms, and it kind of gives you a score from like 0 to 99. And most people should be in the lower third. A lot of patients are in their 50s or 60s on that number. There's some research now that that's being used as a marker of aging. A woman whose work I like will use this questionnaire every time she sees a person and other metrics to say, how well is this person aging? If your GI system is off and you're not focusing well, you have a lot of joint pain and the score is high, you're not really aging well. So that's a good resource. And then I also have a resource on COVID because, we can't escape it. But I want people to be smart about how they look at, do they need to look at some data? There's some specific markers that help us determine about our immune system, whether we're inflamed, our chances of getting COVID. You can look at COVID antibodies now. Does everyone need to be on a vaccine? My take was the vaccine was not a shield, but a safety net at best, but it wasn't for everyone and wasn't enough for most people. So I have some details on that as well. And then I close on one of the articles about what my brother and I try to do when we motivate our tribes, our mentors, who do we mentor? And it's, thinking about how do you get to your goal is closing the gap. G is for gymnastiki, which is the Greek word for exercise, purposeful fitness, gymnasium, gym, exercise. A is for askesis, which is spiritual purpose and focus and discipline. And then the P is the philosophy. What is your philosophy? What is your outlook? So where are you in that gap? Can you use those terms to close the gap on your goals? And there's ways for people to reach me. If they have any questions, they can message me through our practice and our website. And I'd be happy to answer any questions people had if I could be of some value to them.
Yeah, no, that is really helpful. And I definitely recommend checking out these links. We'll make sure everything is posted in the show notes and everything. So you will be able to get these links because it's really valuable data. And as I mentioned before, what Dr. Pappas is talking about, your average physician is not talking about. Okay, this is a very different approach. And some of the markers, I think, we should just touch on that a little bit as well, right? A lot of people say, well, sure, I have blood work done. Okay, but what's being probably analyzed, and you can articulate this much better than I am, but there's, let's just say, a lot more markers, right? That you're evaluating and then looking at the whole picture. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. I'm always amazed when a patient comes to me and they said, my doctor checked everything out and it was 5 tests. And I said, I'm doing 30 or 40 tests. And they're mostly, if not all, covered by the insurance. So there's no reason not to do it. So what's stopping you from knowing all of your hormone pattern? To me, for example, for men, since I'll often work with stubborn men, women often get these concepts right away, but we guys sometimes need a different approach. The interaction in the interface of the stress hormone, like cortisol, glucose or insulin hormone, and testosterone hormone. I have a lot of men who look great and have a testosterone of a 60-year-old because of their stress, because of their alcohol intake, which is a double-edged sword, the lack of fitness, lack of sleep. So where is your hormones taking you? So we're checking all these hormones out. We're looking at markers of inflammation. And there's a variety of them, from CRP to inflammation on the arteries. One of my favorite nutritionists, Johnny Bowden, says the 4 horsemen of aging, in no particular order, is your glucose control, how sticky your blood is, what your sugar levels are. Do you have inflammation? an overactive immune system? Do you have any oxidative stress or free radicals? And then chronic stress. And all those are not just subjective, you can actually objectively measure them. So again, I was impressed, you had very good adrenals and cortisol stress hormones for an athlete, right? Some of the guys that and I know just didn't have those same levels. Whereas the glucose, your mean or average glucose, is not just for a diabetic, right? The lower, the better. The higher the glucose, the smaller the brain. So are you measuring these metrics? Are you looking at the hormone insulin? Oxidative stress or free radicals. Do you have any hooligans impacting on your cells, right? On your establishment? We can actually measure that. And then see, do you need more colors in your diet? Do you need a vitamin? Are you overtraining? And then in the whole world of cardiovascular health, this is a very passionate subject for me, as well as with you. I'll have some links for the listeners about the top 10 cardiac markers that you should be asking for. What kind of advanced cholesterol profile, which measures how many particles of the cholesterol floating, the size of the cholesterol, different types of inflammation. Some are more linked to heart disease than others. There's a test that measures heart strain. Do you have a happy heart? One of the problems a lot of people have in middle age is they snore, they have sleep apnea. And then I measure markers of heart strain, and they already have changes in their heart just on the blood test that could correlate to arrhythmias and whatnot. So the top 10 detailed markers, also looking at markers of blood coagulation and sticky blood. I'll have that list available for people, and they can go ask for it. But that'll entail, as 20, 30 vials of blood, which if you and I can handle, anybody can handle. The guys always have the harder time than the ladies handling it. And then giving you an idea of, where are you at the moment? Where is the river of life? And where can you go with that? So I think there'll be a lot of really good tools for your listeners. They should strive to follow in your footsteps. And it's never too late. It's never too late. So I don't care if a person's 70 or 17. It's never too late to make a U-turn.
Agree. And I think we can't finish off today's conversation without jumping into a little bit on biohacking. And I know I've shared my goal with you that I want to live to 116. So I have a lifespan goal, but I also have a health span goal. And it might have been outrageous 20 years ago, but with some of the advances in technology, and again, a lot of this is around mindset, right? I mean, if you have the financial means, you have actually, the friendships and the relationships, right, with people that are not necessarily dying off, right? You have, you're living an intentional life, then, I think there's definitely some ability to live a little bit longer. So I've been fascinated with, trying different things out. This year, I'm working on NMN to increase my NAD levels, which is really in my cellular health. So I've been kind of working on that coupled with resveratrol. And I definitely want to talk to you next time about trying to get into rapamycin, maybe looking, exploring some of that.
Question.
But any biohacking, kind of tips or supplements or anything that's on your mind this year?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, some of the, macro things versus microscopic things. So on the macro level, the world of not just what we eat, but when we eat, again, fascinated by this fasting movement that I've been embracing since day one, because, our Greek tribes and our Eastern Orthodox Christian faith has fasted for thousands of years based on a church calendar. So I grew up 200 days of the year being told by my grandmother that we should be plant-based and vegetarian, so omnivores and plant-based. So the concept of fasting is interesting. So not just an intermittent fast, which is fine, but maybe, what we eat and when we eat. I've personally gone to a few days a week, often on a Friday and a Monday before and after the weekend, to just having one meal a day. I usually will have maybe like a greens powder, which has a lot of nutrients in there, maybe some green tea, some black coffee, but just not eat anything until the end of the day. So I might go from Sunday night to Monday night. So I find a recovery and a fast is really important. There was a book called The Warrior's Diet, what the Greek and Roman warriors ate. And this author started the intermittent fasting craze. And he said, people on campaign, these warriors underate, if ate anything at all during their campaigns, during their battles, which you and I have every day and your listeners do. So under eating versus intermittent fasting versus one meal a day is a really, really good hack. Some guys can do that, all week, but not just fasting. A lot of my guys fast and then lose muscle mass. So fasting and feasting, I think, is important as well. So not just fasting every day. I'm also very much a fan of the concept of using the outdoors in the sun, right? I think a lot of my Northern European friends are concerned about getting sun exposure. And I tell them it's sunburning that's the problem, and protecting the face is important. But skin cancer risks have increased in modern times. The Irish and the Scots had less of it back in the day. So it's more than just the sun exposure. But I routinely will work out, part of my workout, at least my body composition exercises and my stretching outdoors, from, April until November here in Northern Virginia, often with the shirt off, not to show off, my physique, but to get that sun, because the sun helps with the hormones as well as vitamin D. So working outdoors and exercising outdoors, a lot of guys are just in gyms or in their basement. So doing some things outdoors is really, really important. The role of hot and cold, there's been a lot of big push on using hot techniques and cold techniques. Again, thinking of the Turkish hammam, the Scandinavians, the Russian banya, right? Every culture had these saunas, spas. So for many, many years, I've been using, a portable sauna and hot baths. You can get an inexpensive, high quality portable sauna for a couple $100. That's really, really good. And use that as a workout and then also post-workout. But a lot of research shows that the sauna changes the biochemistry and actually helps with brain growth, not only detoxification, it's great for the heart, it's great for stress. So I'll routinely use that as well. So it's kind of some macro things that I think are very, very good. And then on the micro level, are there some really good tools? What are some of my favorite supplements that I've been a big fan of recently? One of them is playing around with different greens powders. I found one that has some mushroom extracts as well. Most of them have a lot of good antioxidants. There's a company called Thorne that has mushroom extracts and resveratrol and curcumin, as well as some other, and I think NAD as well in it. So I'm a big fan of that in adaptogens because it has the mushroom extracts, which I've been a big fan of. So mushroom extracts, you can get them in coffees and capsules, but they're great for the immune system. They're great for COVID. I love greens powders. I'm still bullish on fish oil. I mean, getting high levels is really important. For athletes, high doses of collagen is really good for joint pain. So I'm very enamored with the use of collagen. I think the things that you mentioned are great that you're doing. Resveratrol and NMN are great. One of my favorite underappreciated supplements is aged garlic extract by a company called Kyolic, a Japanese company that for many, many years has been studying intensely this garlic that they age over 10 years. And it has amazing antioxidant properties. So it not only increases glutathione, it's great for heart disease and plaque and artery age. It's great for gut health. It's an amazing antioxidant. It's one of my favorites. And the company has a lot of combinations where they have that garlic extract with some immune stuff or with some heart stuff, but a powerful product that I think most people should be using. And then using, the so-called nootropics, right? Are there things that can help us get locked in to do deep work? And as the famous Cal Newport says, how do you do deep work? Do you exercise for a while and then get into a deep work state? I think that's great. Would a sauna or an ice bath help? Probably yes. But then taking some nutrients, not just the famous caffeine, but are there other things that can help? And there's a whole, bunch of them, from lion's mane, that mushroom extract, things like carnitine and CoQ10. There's a whole large list, even without a prescription, that I recommend people to experiment with as a citizen scientist. A lot of companies have these combinations of these nootropics or supplements that can help, things that have like tyrosine and antioxidants in it, grapeseed extract. But I think these are really important tools that if you ahead of time set up and block your time and say, listen, I'm going to do a deep work. I'm going to listen to Dave's podcast and then take some action. You need to have, a locked in mind in a quiet environment. You need your brain to be firing on all cylinders. Maybe you work out first and then take your cup of coffee and then you get locked in. So there are a lot of really good tools that I encourage patients to look at.
Yeah, that's really excellent. And I think I'm going to add, one thing as well to this list. And again, it kind of goes back to our overall strategy. And then, in my approach and my personal goals has been, one of my top goals every year is I want to increase my health IQ by at least 10%. So I spend time, instead of listening to business podcasts on the weekend and learning things, I'm, looking at Andrew Huberman and reading your content and Dr. Attia. So I would definitely recommend for people to just, start learning more, right, about what some of this can do. And it's actually, it's really fascinating. And as you put some of these things in practice, which I have done many of those things that you recommended, it's just amazing how much more, you can improve your energy levels, the neuroplasticity of your mind. All of these things kind of come together and, it's very powerful.
Absolutely. You and I are experimenting ourselves and are, I think you and I are healthier now than 5-10 years ago. So I think this is a great sign and a great role model for others and for the next generation. I think the challenge is, unfortunately, that a lot of the, we see this in the military where, the current military has to change their standards because they're not as fit physically and mentally. And I think of you and my brother, and you guys are more fit than these 18-year-olds, men and women who are going to the military. So they can learn a lot from what we're doing, and the Hubermans and the Attias, Ben Greenfield, all these great guys that, you imbibe. So I wholeheartedly agree.
Excellent. Dr. Pappas, I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing your time with us today. It's really been an honor to have you on my team. I really, really grateful for your time and being able to, share some of your insights and wisdom with the audience today.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much. I'm excited. Congratulations on this new chapter. We love the podcast. I utilize your story to many men. So you've been a good role model, although you set a tough standard. So I must say that a lot of guys fall short, but I think they'll think of you as they try to work out more.
Appreciate that. I've got a long ways to go, but I know I'm in good hands.
Excellent. You take care, my friend.
Thanks again.
What if everything you thought you knew about investing was wrong? Would you like to create a wealth strategy like the top 1% have and get exclusive access to top private equity deals that provide downside protection, tax efficiency, predictable cash flow, and have a lucrative upside? Discover how with the Pantheon Advantage and join our investor club today at pantheoninvest.com.